Okay, excellent, great, thank you. Okay, we have a whole excellent group of people. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Career Insights, Exploring Careers Beyond the Courtroom in Law Enforcement. This session has been brought to you by the CDC, the Career Development Center. The Employer Relations team has worked hard to find some excellent panelists for you. We will be starting exactly at 12, which is now. So welcome to all the students, alumni, I think, and then also our panelists. My name is Gita Shalig. I am the Employer Relations Strategist with the Career Development Center, and I hope to have a really excellent 90 minutes for you. Just a couple of introductions. The team behind the scenes, we have the other half of the Employer Relations team, Leila Bonner. Leila will be watching the chat, monitoring the chat during the entire session. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat for her. We also have Jaden Petalano from the Career Services team, and he will be our technical expert behind the scenes. Jaden has also started our recording. Actually, I think Leila started our recording, so we are recording our event. Welcome, and I will get started. We have a lot to cover. Before we get started on the official agenda, I'd like to just say that at KPU, we live, work, and study in a region that overlaps with the unceded traditional and ancestral First Nations territories of the Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Sawasan, Kekwet, and Coquitlam, and with the lands of the Kwantlen First Nation, which gifted its name to our university. The word Kwantlen means tireless runner, and is reflected in the university's motto, through tireless effort, knowledge, and understanding. In the cause of reconciliation, we recognize our commitment to address and reduce ongoing systemic colonialism, oppression, and racism that Indigenous peoples continue to experience. So with that, we'll get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am super excited to be moderating this panel of experts who are going to provide some invaluable insights into careers within criminology and related fields. Our agenda is fairly straightforward, yet filled with some great content. So quickly, just to go through what our agenda is, we're just going to do some welcoming opening remarks. We'll introduce you to our fantastic panelists. And then we're going to do a bit of moderated panel questions. So we have a series of questions that we'll ask each panelist, and they will answer it. And then we'll open up to student Q&A. So the student QA portion is a good 30 minutes, and hopefully all the students and audience members have some interesting questions to ask. And then we wrap up. So pretty simple. I wanted to extend a big thank you to our panelists for being here, to be willing to share their personal career journeys and maybe share some lessons they've learned along the way. It's incredibly important for all of us to hear these diverse stories, not just to guide you as you explore your own career paths, but to remind us that careers often have unexpected turns. For many of us, our careers found us in ways we didn't anticipate, and me included. So the key takeaway for all of you students and audience members today is to stay engaged, be curious, and ask plenty of questions. It's very painless and low pressure for everybody. So our panelists are just going to share their experiences. They're going to cover some hopefully well-known and maybe some unexpected career paths. So enjoy the conversation and get ready to explore some interesting possibilities in criminology, social sciences that you're studying. And I know that there's some students that are probably here that are maybe studying business, or general arts or sciences. There could be little nuggets of information for all of you. So I'm going to stop talking soon. But first, I wanted to say a few housekeeping notes. For all the panelists, please feel free to keep your cameras on and your mics off, aside from when you're speaking. Students and audience members, please keep your mics and cameras off until we open the student Q&A portion of the session. We are recording the session and posting internally for students to access post-event. The recording will not be posted externally. Pictures may be taken and posted on social media handles by staff, students, and panelists. Please, use the hashtag KPUCDC or maybe tag our organizations that are on the panel. Panelists are welcome to add links and resources during the session in the chat. So any additional resources that you might have, feel free to put in there. If any of you have questions during the panel speakers, please feel free to type it in the chat. Leila Bonner will be collecting questions, and we will take that into the student open moderation Q&A portion of the session. So with that, I'm going to move to our introductions and the panel questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask all our panelists to wave their hands and just show that they're there so that you know who they are as I announce their names and the organizations. Then we will move into a formal panel introduction. So Jamie Lord from First West Credit Union, I'll just get you to wave. There's Jamie. And then we have Sergeant Justine Tom from New Westminster Police Department. Barry Zunti from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, so DFO. We have Tina Parkinson and Jenna Thibodeau from BC Prosecution Services. And then we have Mike Larson from KPU Faculty of Criminology, who some of you may know. Okay. So what I'll do is I'm going to now just go through the panel introductions, and in that order, starting with Jamie, I'll ask you to introduce yourself. So your name, your organization, talk a little bit about what your current role is, your educational background, and then a brief career journey and some highlights. So each panel member will have 2 to 3 minutes to introduce who they are. And I'll start with Jamie Lord.
Great. Thanks, Geeta. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to speak about my journey. My name is Jamie Lord, and I'm the manager of the Corporate Security Department at First West Credit Union. We're based in Langley, and we are one of Canada's largest credit unions, as well as one of the largest credit unions in BC. My team is responsible for fraud prevention, fraud detection, and investigations, and I can wholeheartedly say that my career picked me. I had initially actually set out to be a marine biologist or a lawyer. However, I learned very early on that chemistry was not a strong suit of mine. So I had decided to drop chemistry 12 in grade 12 in high school. And the only course that was available for me to take at that moment was criminology. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And one of the reasons I fell in love with it was that I was fascinated about what makes people commit crimes. So that social, psychological, and economic factors, all of those type of things, and how does that contribute to criminal behavior. So I absolutely changed my university trajectory. And because of that, I actually went to Kwantlen. So I am an alumni there and started my diploma in crim and went to pursue my Bachelor of Forensic Investigation in Economic Crime. And while I was doing that, I was actually working at the credit union, which I loved. So I'll stop it there because I think some of the questions will go into kind of how I furthered my career. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jamie. And now I'll pass it on to Sergeant Justine Tom.
Hello, everyone. I have to echo Jamie's sentiments and thank you very much for including me today. So I am a member of the New Westminster Police Department. I got hired here in 2009. And I did my first 5 years on patrol. I went right from patrol to the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team. I did that for 3 years. I came back into major crime. So I did major crime for 5 years. And then in 2022, I was promoted and became our sergeant in recruiting. So that's like my full-time gig here now. On the side, I'm also a member of our strategic communications team, as well as our critical incident stress management team. When it comes to educational background, I do have my BA in criminology, and I am one of those people that's a cookie cutter when it comes to a career in policing, and that I grew up in a policing family. I've wanted wanted to be a police officer since I was, as young as I can remember. My dad was like a 45-year member of the RCMP. And I got photos of me as a 3-year-old wearing a tunic that's like, a red serge that's a million sizes too big for me. My path to municipal policing, was not one that I kind of expected that I was going to end up on. And I have absolutely loved my career here. I volunteered with Corrections Canada prior, and I worked in a bunch of civilian roles in the RCMP prior to getting into this job. But I'm excited to kind of share my knowledge and experience with all of you today.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Justine. I also want to note to the students that are here in the audience, both the New West Police Department and First West Credit Union will be at our career fair next week. So anybody that's registered and attending, please look out for their booths. And then next we have Barry Zenti from DFO. So Barry, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
All right. Yeah, I'm Barry Zenti. I'm a fishery officer with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. I'm currently stationed in Kamloops, and so I'm currently working in the Secwepemc traditional territory, so acknowledge their unceded territory from where I'm calling in from today. So as a detachment commander, I look after Kamloops, Lillooet, and Salmon Arm. That's my substantive job, but I just took an assignment last year to work in recruiting. A little bit of change after working with DFO for 30 years. My educational background is I have a diploma from Lakeland College in Alberta and a degree in conservation law enforcement from Lethbridge Community College, now Lethbridge Polytech. And yeah, I started working seasonally as a conservation officer in Saskatchewan and then Alberta between my years of college. And then Fisheries and Oceans happened to be hiring just like we are now. And I got on pretty much full time at an early age. And I started working in an undercover unit right off the top. It was kind of interesting because I was like 20 years old. I would ride around with these older guys, look like I was their son. We'd be buying and selling fish and things like that. And then I worked around the coast. So I've worked been posted in places like Lillooet, Bella Coola, Port Alberni, Squamish, Steveston, Langley, and then back in Kamloops. So that's where I've been. It's been a great career for me. And I'll get into the questions later.
Great. Thanks, Barry. And I know that the DFO team has also been strong supporters of our career fairs as well. So I know that in the past we've seen your team out. I'm sure you've got lots of great stories to tell, Barry. We're going to move on to the BC Prosecution Services team. So we've got Tina Parkinson and Jenna Thibodeau. I'll get you both to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Tina Parkinson. I work as a district administrator for the Fraser region. I supervise a few offices for BC Prosecution Services, including Abbotsford and Chilliwack. I was managing a hair salon when I decided I needed more stability in my job. So I started looking for government jobs, BC government jobs, and I got in as auxiliary with BC Prosecution Services, doing finance and reception, and I had a financial background for my education. So I started being tasked with data entry and performing reception duties. And once I got into that kind of role and became more comfortable, I was really interested in the criminal side of the job and reading more about the mail that was coming in and sorting and reviewing it. And I really wanted to know more about the criminal side of things and the cases. So I was really analyzing all the evidence that would come in on the case files. And I just started to ask if I could have more work and take on some more tasks so I could learn more. And I really enjoyed that side of things. So I started taking more internal courses through our Public Service Act internal learning system. And I started applying as soon as postings became available, and I got in as a legal assistant. That moved up from an entry level position into the next kind of stage. And in there, I just kind of grew as much as I could and took on as much work as I could to learn more of the roles. And at that point, I knew I wanted to continue my growth in education and become more in the serious files. So I applied for a senior legal analyst role, and I started working and contributing to the major crime files, like working on assault with the weapons and B&Es and those kind of. I found that interesting, and it was my cup of tea. And once I got going into that role, I kind of built myself up, and I was able to take on more work and cover my office manager when she was away, or there was lots of changes during COVID in our line of work. We went paperless, lots of large tasks within the facilities. So I helped with lots of implementation of that, and I gained my leadership skills through that. And that's where I gained the knowledge to be able to become a district administrator and apply for that role. So now that's where I am now.
Great. That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Tina. And just Jenna, did you want to have a quick?
Yeah, I'm just quick. I actually, unlike Tina, started out as an office manager at Surrey Crown Council and moved in from office manager to district administrator there. My background is in political science, and I worked for law firms before I came to government. So yeah, I've been working at the Surrey Crown Council since 2017. And yeah, I've had a different background. I have a paralegal degree as well as a political science degree. So it takes all kinds, and all kinds can work at our office.
That's fantastic. And this is what's exciting about this type of conversation, is to see you could have a science degree and still be working in the criminal justice space. So thank you for that. So then we have our last panelist, our very own Mike Larson, one of our faculty members. So I'll let Mike, you introduce yourself.
Thanks very much. Hello, everybody. It's good to see everyone here, and some familiar faces, I think, of students of mine in the session as well. My name is Mike. I've been teaching at KPU in the criminology department for about 15 years now, and this is home. I didn't start off wanting to be a professor of criminology, or a professor at all, actually. I initially intended to go into law, as I think a lot of criminology students do. I did an undergraduate degree in criminology at the University of Ottawa. And then, as part of that, I started doing some co-op and practicum type work. And one of the benefits of Ottawa, of course, is it's where the federal government is. So I ended up getting my first kind of career or position at the Federal Department of Justice, working with the National Crime Prevention Center, where it was then located. And that was a really interesting look inside of government. And it made me decide, you know what, I kind of want to stay in this field, but I think I'd like to become a bit more experienced. So I went to graduate school as well. And in graduate school, one of the things you do is you're a teaching assistant. And that put the hook in me for teaching. I thought, I had thought, I'm done university. I'm not going to go back. And then look where I am now. I kind of stuck around forever because I love teaching. And one of the things about being in my role is that I get to do research. I get to write books and articles. I get to collaborate with people all across Canada and around the world. And I also get to spend a lot of my time volunteering and working in the nonprofit sector as well. And a significant portion of my work, my field is information and privacy work. And so for the last 10 years, I've been with the board of directors and as the president of the BC Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. And it's really given me some insights into the thriving nonprofit sector in British Columbia, where a lot of people who have criminology backgrounds can really find a home. So looking forward to talking further, but that's my journey.
Great. Thanks, Mike. I know that you've also been a past recipient of the Dean of Arts Teaching Award, the Dean of Arts Service Award, and you've done a lot of work co-chairing the being the co-chair of the criminology department. So thank you for all your work. So I do find it very interesting how everybody's, careers have kind of come to where they are. I actually also started in governments. And government's a great place to learn and figure out what you're going to do. And I actually did work for the Ministry of Attorney General, but I worked on information systems, so justice information systems. I wanted to be a physiotherapist, and I'm far from that now. So you just never know where opportunity is going to come up and where your career takes you. So what we'll do now is move on to the moderated panel questions. So each panelist will be asked a question. You have 2 to 3 minutes to respond. And then, as I mentioned earlier, panelists can add additional resources in the chat. If the audience or students have questions during this part, feel free to put it into the chat, and we will bring that up later. So without any further ado, I think the first question is actually for Jamie from First West Credit Union. So Jamie, as a KPU criminology alumna, which we are very celebrating, we're celebrating that you are from KPU. Can you talk a little bit about what led you to a career in fraud prevention and financial crimes, and how did your background prepare you for this role?
Excellent. Absolutely. So, so as I was going to school, I was doing my school part-time. I actually was working at the credit union. So I started out here part-time. Actually, it was really, truly just doing photocopying and making coffee to start. And then I worked my way up into being a teller while I was going to school. And what was interesting is I started to really struggle on what did I want to do with my career? Because I had these two options in front of me as I was moving through. And did I want to pursue my career in the credit union field, or did I want to pursue my career in criminal justice that I was going to school with? And had a really great mentor at the time. So I definitely recommend and highly recommend folks choose mentors along their way who really encouraged me to continue both options. And I think both of us at the time had no idea what that would look like. I had no idea how I would be qualified to continue on in criminology and at the credit union. And what happened is within a couple of years, our credit union had grown. We had merged with another credit union, and a new corporate security department was formed. And I was hired on as the third person within the team at that time. And so fast forward 23 years after that team was formatted, we have now 15 team members. And I've had the amazing opportunity to grow from an entry-level role within the team as a corporate security officer into one of 3 leaders on our team currently, and played an important part in shaping the development of our team today and those who are on our team. And so that's something that was very exciting to do. And I think what was great is it allowed that while I was pursuing my education, I was able to have that foundation within the credit union system. And that was really key in preparing me for a role that I had no idea would even be available down the road. So I think that was interesting. I trusted the process. I had no idea what it would look like, but I was able to use my skills at the credit union as well as my education and kind of bridge them together and marry them together. And then beyond that, as I continued my career in the financial crime area, I was able to become a certified financial crime investigator through the International Association of Financial Crime Investigators. And I'll put that link in the chat as well.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jamie. What an interesting space to be in. I mean, now, but even 23 years ago when it was just starting out. I think a lot of times, students may have careers in places that don't exist just yet.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
To be open to that, fantastic. Oh, and also, so is First West hiring?
Maybe. Definitely check out our career pages.
Just
we're always
students might be wondering.
Thank
you. So thank you for that. We'll move on to the next question. And this is for Sergeant Justine Tom from the New West Police Department. So we have seen that New West Police Department recently on their websites and a lot of their materials, you promote progressive policing. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and how you develop and mentor a new generation of officers to be well equipped for this career? Could you also talk specifically about skills and qualities you look for in these new recruits? And then maybe what are some of the areas of specialization or career paths that they can pursue? I've lumped multiple questions in one for you, Justine.
I will give you some answers. So honestly, when it comes to policing, as a career, it has changed exponentially over the last number of years, and it continues to change. When I first started in 2009, I think as an organization, our approach to things was different than even is now. And one thing that I really love about this place is the recognition that things change and we need to change with it. That comes with, how we deal with different communities. That, comes with the types of, technology that we use internally that, extends to our training. We very much so are an organization that actually cares about the people that work here. We are a mid-sized organization. We're not super huge and we're not super tiny. And we actually have the ability to truly look at, mentoring people and allowing them to kind of grow their career paths to what actually suit them. And that starts from the very beginning. Obviously, everybody that gets hired here goes through the police academy at the GIBC. They are constantly looking at changing the program and adapting. And that's a combination of like classroom training, the field training program within kind of the middle, and kind of those real world experiences. We have lots of scenario-based training, which is incredibly important. And based off kind of the size of organization there's such incredibly open lines of communication, like among all kind of ranks within the organization, and that also allows people to learn and grow. Like you have the ability to go talk to people that are more experienced than you, that are that are mentors in certain areas, and you can learn and grow from them. This truly is not a go it alone profession. Nobody is expected that they come in this career and they're going to know all the answers and they're going to know everything throughout an entire career. It changes so rapidly that you're constantly going to be learning and growing, and having the ability to rely on the people that you work with is huge, and knowing that it's not going to be looked down upon, that you're having to seek out assistance from somebody. I would say overall, when it comes to kind of our view on recruits and hiring is different in that as an agency, we can't keep hiring like the same person over and over again, because then you're not actually filling in the gaps in an organization. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has areas within a career that may interest them versus like to someone else, those things might not be interesting. And I think historically, when it came to hiring, a good chunk of the time you were pulling people from very specific fields with very specific educational backgrounds. And that is not our approach now. We very much so are looking for people that kind of possess superior skills in the areas of the competencies that are there, things like communication skills, conflict management, decision making, and a lot of those are highly prevalent in customer service fields. 90% of this job is, and I'm making up that stat, I couldn't actually tell you what the percentage breakdown is, but it's dealing with people and it's common sense. If you have the ability to engage with the public professionally and with compassion, and you have common sense, like you can do this job. And a lot of people think you need to come from that cookie cutter background. And I realized that I am cookie cutter, and that like at the time, that's what I thought that I needed to do to get into this career. And it's not accurate, I would say, to now, at least in our approach as an agency, is, people thought that you needed to have that crim background. You needed to volunteer as a reserve or do auxiliary or community policing. And then you needed to get into like corrections or loss prevention or security. Those things are all great. Don't get me wrong, but they are not a requirement to get into this job. some of the best police officers we have working here came from completely different fields, whether it be finance or teaching or coaching backgrounds. We have a constable on the road right now who's incredible, who actually used to manage a bar. We have somebody here that was a baker, airplane pilot, people that worked in law. So such a wide variety of backgrounds, and I think that sometimes is a hindrance to people, and that they think because they didn't do, that cookie cutter expectation that they can't get into this job, when in reality, you might very much so have the skills that would make you an incredible police officer. When it comes to career paths, I would say a lot of people think that policing is, wearing a uniform and driving around in a police car arresting people. And yes, there is a component of that is policing, and yet there's so much more to it. In 15 years, I have gotten to do some incredible things, but if you talk to any other police officer here, they've done, such a wide variety of things as well, whether it's like traffic, whether it's dealing with frauds, whether it's getting into communications, whether it's the mental health aspect aside, community engagement. There's tons of specialty units that deal with kind of major crime stuff, or, terrorism, gangs. Yeah, there's a ton of options within this career where you can have kind of multiple careers within a career, which is pretty cool.
That's great. And I've heard of a lot of people starting policing later on, like as a second career.
We honestly, we hire all over the map. A lot of people have in their head that on one end that I need more life experience. And so they think that, you got to wait a number of years before you're going to get hired. I have hired people quite young, like 21. But then we've also hired people well into their 40s. So it's all over a map. Lots of times it's second careers. Lots of times it's people that have known they've wanted to do this since they were a kid. So you don't ever want to rule it out, because there's lots of opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, Justine. That's great. The next question is for Barry. Many students may be familiar with police work that Justine just talked about, law enforcement, traditional law enforcement, but might not understand the unique environmental, scientific, and conservation-focused aspects of fisheries enforcement. So can you talk a little bit about how the role of a DFO officer differs from traditional law enforcement careers in terms of skills and possibly daily responsibilities?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to add there, similar to Justine, we hire a broad spectrum of candidates that, aren't always cookie cutter, that go to, there's colleges that specifically are from criminal justice programs like yours, or in your college, and, Lethbridge, there's conservation programs and resource management officer technology at VIU. But, our current officers that are in training didn't go to those colleges. Like one person was a propane truck driver. A lot of our candidates start off as admin staff working for us, and they like, hey, these fishery officers are going out and having lots of fun in the field, and I want to do that instead of doing admin stuff at the office, running finances or whatever. So we've had lots of our admin staff turn into successful fishery officers too. So that's our role is quite a bit different. You got DFO officer, and we work for DFO, but our primary, our job is called a fishery officer. And so that is significantly different. Like, fish don't live in offices. They don't, they don't live in buildings. So we spend a lot of time looking after fish. So we're spending times on rivers, lakes, oceans. We work with whales, marine mammals, and then other aquatic endangered species that aren't fish, whether it's mussels or clams that are endangered, things like that. So, we're not a typical 9 to 5 job. We have quite a different and jobs throughout our region, because we have offices like on the BC coast or our Pacific region, for example. We have offices in Whitehorse and Prince Rupert, islands like Bella Bella, inlets like Bella Coola and Port Alberni and all around the island. And then we have lots of offices in the interior BC, mainly looking after salmon and or species of fish that come through um, stores and fish plants and things like that. So offices like Chilliwack, Kamloops, Lillooet, Prince George, Williams Lake. So those offices, they differ quite a bit. If you're in the BC interior, you're obviously not in the ocean protecting whales from people driving too close to them. But you're working, closely with Indigenous communities on fisheries or recreational fisheries. And if you're on the ocean, you're working on large vessels. I put a little picture there, the types of vessels we have, or that's basically a PowerPoint slide. We work in teams often alone sometimes when we're doing vehicle patrols. We have our own plane on the coast where we patrol the ocean on a regular basis. Some people work on large ships at periods of time and go to the north. We do international fisheries, so we have a ship that goes south of Russia and over towards Japan in the North Pacific, protecting our salmon that go that far. The salmon from the BC interior go as far as the Bering Sea, so we're protecting them all in the ocean where other countries are not allowed to fish them. So some people spend a month on a ship straight. Some people are out for the day. Some people never get on a ship for the most part. They run a jet boat in the BC interior. So it's not your 9 to 5 job, and it's quite a bit different than policing. We do have people that work in the city in Vancouver, and they certainly still go out on the ocean but they'll check fish plants and they'll do investigations on large scale commercial fisheries crime internationally and things like that as well. We have a National Fisheries Intelligence Unit, so we have fishery officers that work on intelligence gathering across Canada and work with other agencies in the United States and Japan, other countries on illegal fish operations around the world.
Wow, that sounds super exciting and sounds like a better office view than I have, which is I have no window.
There you go.
But that sounds very interesting and lots of different areas to focus in on. That's fantastic. Thank you. Our next question is directed to Tina or Jenna. I'm not sure which one's going to answer this. Can you talk a little bit about what the BCPS team management and operational team does, and what experience and knowledge does a student need to prepare for working in this space or in other law services related spaces? Beyond a diploma or degree, what skills should a student bring to the table?
I'm going to answer this. So my name is Jenna. I said before, I am the district administrator at Surrey Crown Council. So Surrey Crown Council is one of the busiest offices, prosecution offices in the province, as I'm sure you can all imagine. We see it all there, probably like New Westminster Police Department. So we take the files that are given to us from the police, and we give them to Crown for charge approval. So the Crown approves charges, and that gets sworn with the courts. Having a degree or diploma in something like criminology will give you an edge when applying for positions at our office, because we're looking for people who understand the criminal justice system. We're looking for people who know about the rules of court, know about what disclosure is, having general understanding of the legal terminology. And you also should have an interest in criminal justice and be comfortable with dealing with disturbing cases. We can see and hear a lot of things in a day-to-day in the day-to-day runnings of files, and things that just probably may disturb some people, but you have to be able to kind of put it to the back of your head and move forward. We deal with things like just like traumatic violence, death, and dealing with victims and witnesses that have been impacted by crime. Dealing with victims and victims and witnesses is a really big one that we do a lot of. And as a legal assistant or legal clerk at our office, you would be, dealing one-on-one with the victims, and getting their statements from them and that kind of thing. You have to have a really good, people skills, be able to work with people. We do like people from, as they said in policing, from different backgrounds. We come from all around. I'm from political science background, and I never thought I would end up at the BC Prosecution Service. So it also helps if you enjoy a fast-paced, high-profile work environment. If you're very organized and pay attention to detail, we, as legal assistants, they do all of the vetting of all of the police notes and the disclosure that comes over from the police. So you're the first set of eyes on those notes, on what's going on, and you have to make sure that you're paying attention to the detail, because if you miss vetting something, that could, impact a lot of people. So that's one thing that we really look for and enjoy working as a team. We love that. If you're an excellent communicator and thrive working under pressure with tight timelines, are comfortable using computers, we're always looking for people with experience with Microsoft Office, with Adobe Acrobat. Adobe Acrobat is key for what we're looking for in resumes from people. I think that should answer.
That's great. That's great. There's some really interesting points there. So basically, if anybody's really keen on watching Dexter series and CSI and really interested in crime, I thought the part where you said dealing with victims and witnesses was really critical. So people who could take on the heaviness of that, I could imagine would be quite a challenge and very interesting. Thank you, Jenna. That was great. I should also note that I worked on the Crown Counsel module for Justin, which I'm sure your team uses.
Yes, we do. We still use Justin.
You still use that was 25 years ago. So a nice question from round one is for Mike. My slides are not moving there. So Mike, I know you've done some you have substantial experience and interest in working in the nonprofit sector. Looking back on your time in academia, how have you seen the field of criminology evolve, specifically in nonprofit sector, and what shifts in theory, research, or societal influences have shaped this evolution, in your opinion?
It's a big and it's an important question. One of the things that's really, I think everyone can see here is that criminology is a very broad, very diverse field, and it's constantly changing, and it's constantly kind of trying to keep up with developments in broader society. And often people come into criminology and have an idea of what the criminal justice system is. It's, cops, courts, and corrections, which are obviously a very important part of the system, but it turns out that the justice system, broadly understood, doesn't really function in Canada without the involvement of a lot of nonprofit organizations. And importantly for students, nonprofit doesn't mean unpaid. It can mean people can volunteer in a nonprofit capacity. Often it's the directors of organizations that do that. But there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that do research. They do advocacy. They get involved in public policy discussions. They provide direct services and social supports, and they really kind of are often adjacent as partners to some of the formal institutions of criminal justice, and they're very much on the front lines of what's going on, and in some cases trying to fill gaps in the system or address emerging needs that our law really hasn't kept up with. My own kind of involvement in nonprofit work has been in the area of kind of law reform work, and there's a really thriving community doing this in BC. And it's one of the things I think is very exciting. As a student, you learn a lot about law and justice, and you learn about some of the challenges we face. And then the question often is, well, what are we going to do about it? What can I do about it? Is there any way to actually change any of this stuff? And there is, right? There are mechanisms to make representations, to conduct research, to put together packages of information that can go to lawmakers, that can go to to parliamentary and legislative committees that are considering changes to laws in areas that you're familiar with and passionate about, and that's what really draws me. And so, in terms of what's kind of evolved around this, I think there is a greater recognition of the importance of evidence-based policy development. So for people who are looking to kind of change the way systems function, you want to be able to make a solid case, a well researched argument, and a lot of those skills that people acquire in the context of doing a criminology or criminal justice or on either a BA type degree are really valuable, right? Being able to make concise arguments, engage with literature, design and conduct research, and all of that can ladder into making some calls for very serious public policy change. And so I think there's a very close alignment between some of the issues that are really pressing in society around justice, social justice, reform for police and law, and the work that you can do in criminology as a criminologist or as someone working in the nonprofit sector. So in terms of shifts in theory, research, and societal influences, there's a couple of things I think that are really important to note. And one has already come up, which is an increasing recognition that we need interpersonal skills as a really central skill set in the criminal justice field. You can have people who have deep wells of knowledge, but if they can't engage effectively, if they can't resolve conflicts or collaborate, they have a hard time thriving. So we really put a lot of emphasis in criminology on developing those which of course is information and privacy. This field, like many other aspects of criminology, is tremendously impacted by technology, right? Technological shifts. So a lot of what I spend my time dealing with right now is like biometric facial recognition technology and the ethics and law around that, and the implications of artificial intelligence for criminal justice. And so for people who are interested in technology and studying it and trying to make sure that we're using it in the right way effectively, I think that this is a really interesting field to be in. I would say also that criminology, just to close here, in Canada in recent years, and I'll highlight KPU because we've really been doing this consciously. We really try and engage with issues and with Indigenous communities and also with aspects of the criminal justice system that are kind of brought to us or in collaboration with Indigenous communities as part of a kind of a commitment to collaboration and reconciliation. So that's a major shift in theory and society as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Mike. Thank you for that. And it just goes to show one of the things that I've noticed with employers and industry is soft skills, the interpersonal skills that you mentioned is really, really critical. No, exciting stuff here. I'm also noting that I'm way behind in time. So the next series of questions, we're going to try to maybe answer it a little faster. So I'm going to put this back. So this is the second set of questions, and this goes back to First West. So this is for Jamie. Where do you see the future of financial fraud prevention heading? And how should students prepare for these changes? Can you talk specifically about certifications and education or training that you recommend for students that are really interested in going in this direction into financial fraud investigation?
You bet. Absolutely. I'll say quickly that the future of financial crime is absolutely evolving rapidly, really driven by advancements in technology, kind of echoing what Mike was saying, changes in regulatory requirements, the growing sophistication of these criminal networks that are out there. AI is huge. It is being exploited by the bad actors and the fraudsters, but there's a lot that we can use AI on the good side of things as well. And Mike kind of alluded to that too. And how do you skill yourself up in that area? Because we're looking to see how do you use AI to detect and prevent fraud, to try and stay, as as close as we can to the bad actors that we know are always, a few steps ahead of us. So that's kind of where we're going. So then what can you do from an educational perspective? I'll put some links in the chat as well. But again, in the financial crime industry, there's many jobs that are out there, and a lot of them really are around the investigation side of things. That's primarily what my team is responsible for, and analytics. So a variety of degrees that are available out there. And again, it's that diversity. So degrees are good. Education is great, but it comes back to those interpersonal skills, those soft skills, skills. That's really critical. And we're finding that you can teach the analytical skills, you can teach the investigation skills, but if you can really as an individual work on increasing those soft skills, that's huge. And I think that will do you really well. So those things could be, you know, strong ability for research and investigations, data analytics, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, and having a strong ethical awareness. I'll put that in there as well. Again, in our industry, that's huge. You hear a lot of this heaviness that some people can deal with jobs in, and even you think financial crime, what is that? But we're seeing victims after victims of scams and coming through, and we're having these really difficult emotional conversations with our clients who have lost their entire life savings due to scams, and that's really hard to deal with. So I know we're in the essence of time. Maybe Gita, I'll leave it there, but I'll put some more information in the chat.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Really interesting area for sure. So the next question is for Justine. What challenges do underrepresented groups such as female officers or officers from diverse backgrounds face in leadership? And how are you engaging new recruits and becoming more inclusive in this space?
Thank you for the question. To be honest, I think each leader is going to face their own unique challenges. You know, as women in policing, we're not all a monolith. We all like have, you know, different experiences. Same with diverse populations. They're gonna, you know, everyone's gonna have their own kind of experiences. I think imposter syndrome is definitely something that exists, but I actually think that's just like across the board, probably in any profession. There's also like a pressure in knowing that you are a role model, and like at least in my instance, like I am very visible within my work, and you're wanting to do a good job and be representative for people to know that they can, you know, you can do this job regardless of kind of your gender or you know, your background. It's also showing and reflecting, which this is something that I honestly am continually trying to navigate myself, is balancing work priorities and home priorities. Having that work-life balance is huge, and as a leader, you also want to reflect that. You want to show what your standards are, and people feed off of that. I think for a long time, policing has recognized that women, that we bring, you know, a unique set of skills to this role. And I do think over time that we, because there is more diversity in this career now, you are seeing more when it comes to leaders actually in roles. But there is a lot more now to formal mentorship programs. You know, we try and have kind of networking events internally within the department. We also had a ton of policy changes towards things like improved family leave. One thing that I think is really cool here about our organization is that women in our organization actually make up just under 30% of our sworn staff. And of the police departments with 100 people or more in BC, we actually have the greatest gender diversity in BC for police departments, and we're number 8 on a national level. So I do feel that we're doing good things here. And it's interesting being a recruiter, because I have so many conversations with people that think, you know, that because they're a woman or because they're like an immigrant to Canada, that they think that they can't do this job, when in reality there are people before you that have done this job, that can do it, that can, you know, that can kind of make that jump into this career, and there's going to be people after us. I do just think it's important to see, you know, reflection in the career. Like, you're more likely to get into a career when you see people like you that are actually doing the job. And as an organization, we need to be representative of our community. So I think this is a goal for us, and it continues to be a goal for us.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, representation, it does matter. especially for young people to see someone that looks like them doing something they might be interested in. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Justine. The next question is for Barry. This question, what specialized knowledge or training do DFO officers need beyond the traditional law enforcement? So such as environmental sciences, marine biology, indigenous resource management. You mentioned quite a bit of that part of the job. So can you talk a little bit about the training and knowledge they'd learn or develop in the role?
Yeah, for sure. As far as our knowledge or training, we have some asset. Like right now, our minimum standard for our application is grade 12. You don't have to have anything other than a grade 12, and if you're a permanent resident or Canadian citizen, then you can apply. And then similar to Justine, we have a really high proportion of female leadership in our organization. Like a lot of our area chiefs and our current director is female and has been female for quite some time. So we have a pretty diverse workforce. Yeah. So as far as training, if you only require grade 12, well, you're not required to even have a boating license or anything, have any knowledge. However, if you do have environmental science background, criminal justice law, it tends to help you out throughout your career, in my experience. Those fishery officers that have a legal background, in my experience, tend to do quite well. And it doesn't have to be like a resource, just having a basic understanding of law. As far as training, like we teach how to operate vessels. Like fishery officers, we're on the water. Fish live in water, so fishery officers, everyone has to learn how to drive a boat, and we run people through the same training that the Coast Guard SAR techs do. And I'm a jet boat instructor, and we teach people how to run jet boats in the BC interior, and then just standard boats on the ocean. So that's one of the specialized training and experience. Also use of equipment like ATVs, canoes at times, that sort of stuff. And then resource management training. We teach people how we manage fish, and we teach in training how you identify fish. So we have various species of salmon, and I would say the majority of the people that we've hired over the last 5 or 10 years, they couldn't identify one salmon from the other. So, we provide a lot of training. If you have, environmental science background or a law enforcement background, it certainly helps through your career, but not a requirement.
Okay, great. So an arts or science student could easily
absolutely.
If they're interested, they'll get on-the-job training.
Yeah, our current person in training was formerly a propane truck driver, and the other person that just finished training was a 911 operator.
Okay, great, awesome.
Yeah,
sounds exciting. Okay, so the next question is for Tina or Jenna. What types of entry-level positions are available at the BC Prosecution Service for graduates in criminology or other social science degrees? And what does the career progression look like? How do they move up and develop?
Okay, so the entry-level position would be a legal clerk. Legal clerks perform duties, different duties like reviewing documents, accepting materials coming into the office, and dealing with people at the front counter. So it could be people collecting their disclosure. They don't have to have anything but a high school diploma, and some office experience is an asset, I'd say, to get the position. You started at about $50,000 a year for a legal clerk. And after about 6 to 12 months, you can apply to become a legal assistant. And in a legal assistant role, you would be directly dealing with the files from intake to trial. And you would go up in salary to about $54,000 and up. And then from there, you'd need an additional 6 to 12 months experience to get into a senior legal analyst role, where you'll be working on more complex, serious files, and you'd be working with the Crown more directly, and you'd be earning 60,000 and up from that position, where then you could look into, we have something called Pacific Leaders. It's like a scholarship kind of program that's run through the ministry, and it's fully funding your education if you wanted to pursue going into paralegal or getting any education to further to become a supervisor. And any salary range for paralegal supervisory roles go from about 67,000 to 125,000. So that's how you kind of would progress from an entry level up. And so summarizing that, you'd be a legal clerk to start. Within 18 months, you could be into a more complex role of a senior legal analyst. Yeah, so
That's great. That's great. Thank you for that information. It does show that there's professional development opportunities, and there is a sort of a path. So thank you. That's really helpful. So for the second round of questions, I have one last question, and that is for Mike. How effective has research in the field of criminology been in moving forward our collective knowledge about criminology? What kinds of research have you been involved in? So if you can just talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an ongoing issue, right? I mean, criminology is a field that kind of reinvents itself. It's an interdisciplinary kind of rendezvous field. So at my office in the criminology department across the hall, I have a sociologist and a lawyer. Beside me, a psychologist. Down the hall, people who are police officers or former police officers. So it's very diverse, and that means that our areas of research interest are quite diverse as well. We still remain focused on some of those core questions, right? The criminology has always been focused on. So why do people make certain laws? Why do they break certain laws? And then how should we respond to that? I mean, that's always going to be a perennial area of research, and you as a criminologist can really choose to focus on a particular niche area within that, which is one of the reasons I love the field. You can kind of reinvent your focus over time. It can be boring to stay on the same thing for an entire career. So you can, shift gears in terms of your teaching and in terms of your research. My own research, I started off doing a lot of work in the early years after the events of September 11th, 2001. I was focusing on a lot of national security issues and changes in law and civil liberties associated with that. And that's what got me interested in surveillance. That's what got me kind of digging into, various activities of government agencies that were, reluctant to release certain records. And so I started getting very much into access to information and freedom of information as mechanisms for research, and using those alongside things like interviews to dig into the issues that I was interested in. So I've researched surveillance practices and immigration detention in Canada, and more recently, a lot of my research is public policy focused in partnerships with nonprofit organizations. So, for example, I look at things like privacy policies in the K-12 system in British Columbia, or I look at how we deal with how we deal with the ethics of releasing records related to historical war crimes in the context of World War II, or I look at how comparative privacy law across the world has developed, and where we should go in Canada. So it's very diverse, and it's often either trying to lead policy or law development, or to follow recent developments in the field, which always makes it exciting. There's always more to do than you have time for, but I think that's part of the interest.
Yeah, sounds like a very inquisitive, inquiring mind, and learning about the different landscapes and how to change it. So I think it's really interesting about research and policy and being able to make change. Leila, how are we doing for time? I know that I'm probably past our due time for round 3. So should we proceed to round 3, or do we want to open up for the student Q&A?
Well, I think that depends on if we can do round 3 quickly. We don't have too many questions in the chat right now, so I feel like if we wanted to get into round 3, we could. Maybe we just keep the answers short, and then we can hopefully accumulate more questions in the chat from students.
Okay, great. Thanks, Leila. I will go back to Jamie for your last question in the round. What is one piece of career advice that you would give to students interested in fraud prevention and financial crimes?
Yeah, I think one of the things, if you have an interest in this area, consider a part-time job at a financial institution, particularly if you're going to school part-time, to develop those skills in the entry level. Again, that can build that foundation for you if you want to move into other areas. I've seen this be a very successful pathway for many folks in the industry, and it's sometimes something you can do while going to school. Make a little bit of money, of course. That's important along the way. And most financial institutions are usually hiring for frontline roles like tellers, for example. I know they're called different things at different financial institutions, but everybody knows that terminology. And sometimes they even offer Saturdays if the branches are open. So again, it can become a good option for those who are kind of wanting to start that foundation, build it, and then get to know what options are in a financial institution along the way.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Jamie. The next question is for Justine. This is really around how officers work with social services and community partners. So what role do officers play beyond just traditional enforcement in supporting vulnerable populations such as homelessness and addiction? Can you sort of talk about what it looks like in real life when officers are working with social service and community partners?
Absolutely. So again, this kind of ties back to a point I had made earlier in that policing, a lot of people think that we're driving around in uniform arresting people, when in reality, that is not actually entirely all that we're doing, even on a patrol level. Vulnerable populations are often victims of crime. And I think we've come a long way, but I think we still have a long way to go in actually, playing a role in building trust and relationships, and actually emphasizing that we are here to help them, and we're here to help them seek justice, or we're here to help them with resources. We do have lots of really good relationships with different community groups. I did put one in the chat there. Within the city, we actually have the peer assisted care team, which is city run, but Purpose Society, which is also an organization here within the city, has some involvement in it. But we can make client referrals to them. So there are lots of instances where people don't want police showing up for mental health related calls, and our relationship with PACT and the service that they provide is a benefit to community members in those instances. Lots of times with PACT, either we can make a referral or residents can actually call in relation to somebody that's actually experiencing a mental health crisis. And it actually will mean that they receive a response that is actually more appropriate to them and their needs at that time. And it also frees up resources on our end to deal with other things. So it is for sure those community-based programs, and recognizing that kind of we need to work together. We're not necessarily working, independently of one another, and that most of the time we have the same goals. It's just sometimes the approach needs to be different.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Justine. Our next question is back to Barry. I just wanted to highlight the problem-solving, diplomacy, conflict resolution skills that are unique to DFO officers, especially working with fishers, Indigenous communities, environmental organizations. So can you share a real-world example of a challenging case where you had to balance enforcement, education, conservation, working with coastal communities?
Yeah, for sure. There's one in particular that really stands out to me, which I was involved in, and it's over the last decade, where one of the Indigenous communities, because of injustices and things that had happened in the past, really hated the fishery officers. And there was a real dislike, and they were referred to as the boogeyman. And, were told from a young age to run away from the fishery officers. However, I had two fishery officers work for me and myself, and we started working closely with the community. We ended up buying a couple canoes, and there's a picture of one of our canoes in the top picture that I just put there, a 30-foot canoe. and we started doing canoe journeys with this and other communities. And often it's my experience, people see a uniform like this. You know, you look at me, it's like, wow, you know, that's just the government. And people think like that often when you first, they don't think that you have, you know, you're a person and you have families and challenges and struggles just like everyone else. And then when we um, organize a canoe journey, anywhere from like 2 canoes, and we've organized them with this community up to 20 canoes and 400 people around the coast that will come. And then we work together to organize a canoe, you know, a canoe journey, and we establish those relationships. We have to, you know, struggle together, to work together, to try and resolve, you know, all kinds of issues, to do a 10-day canoe journey for 400 people, and you're organizing it together. And then when it comes back to the work, things that you used to think were a struggle, it's just nothing anymore. And so what went from the, you know, scorn looks to the fishery officers. The fishery officers go to that community now, and people run, but they'll run up to the truck and just, and you know, whether it's a counselor or some of the youth, they'll come to give the fishery officer a hug, and that's true. And so, you know, that is one way. We have our pillar one approach, which is education stewardship, where we go into schools, we go into communities, and we do, you know, canoe journeys and other outreach things to teach about fish and work together on co-managing the resource.
That sounds great. Barry, it sounds like it really about human connection, like human
sure.
and community connection is critical. That's great. So I have 2 more questions. Leila, how are we for time? Do we have a lot of questions in the chat that we?
Yeah, a good question. We have a couple questions that have come in the chat. So maybe if we'd like to pivot over to the Q&A, we can. And then maybe we can come back to our last 2 panelist questions.
Yeah, let's do that. I'll pass it on to you then.
Awesome. Let me just bring up the questions here. I'll just be directing them to each panelist as we go along. And in the chat, I'll be marking them with a check mark if they've been answered. So attendees who are listening can make sure that their question has been tackled. So your first question is for well, it's for both Justine as well as Tina. Let me just make sure I'm wording this correctly. Are jobs at your 2 organizations available for students or applicants who do not yet have PR status? Maybe we go from Justine and then to Tina, just because that's who's in front of my screen.
Yeah, I can definitely answer that. Within a police department, so there's 2 kind of ways to look at this. One, on the practicum side of things, we do hire practicum students. It depends on the role that that person is doing while they're here during their practicum, on whether or not they can be an international student or not. And where that comes in is, in some roles you need to have a security clearance. And one of the requirements of a security clearance, which these are dictated by the Government of Canada, is you do need to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. So for actual employed paid positions within the police department, one of the minimum requirements would be citizenship or permanent residency. A lot of people hear that and then immediately think this is never going to happen for me. But a lot of people recognize that that is a path that they want to go down, like they want to become a PR or a citizen, and you can do a lot of things kind of in the interim that are going to lead you to having more success when you want to get to that career. But when it comes to the practicum student side of things, if you're not accessing databases and you're not having necessarily access to vulnerable populations, you don't necessarily need a security clearance. So with those instances, we would bring on international students.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that answer, Justine. Tina, how about yourself?
For us, if you have a work permit, you can apply for auxiliary positions until your work permit has expired or is renewed. Any permanent positions, you would have to have a citizenship or a permanent residency.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that, Tina. All right, moving on to our next question. This may be something that you've just addressed, Justine, but can you confirm that you offer or do not offer practicum opportunities for international students then?
Yeah, we would offer practicum opportunities to international students. It would just be dependent on the role and the duties that they would be doing. Historically, when we have brought on practicum students from schools, it's usually been through the Career Center. So it's not like a direct contact with us, but it would be going through the contacts on kind of the internal end that then reach out to us.
Perfect. No, thanks for that. Our next question, I'm going to open this up to the whole group, and people who would like to jump in can, because this is more of a general question. We have a student in the chat who says they come from a criminology background, but they are currently studying psychology. They have experience working in insurance, finance, and they're passionate about public service with the goal of advancing in the public sector. And they're looking just for general advice on where to begin, I suppose, with their career or work experience, things like that. Anyone in the panel who would be interested, love to get your thoughts on this, as people who are all, in the kind of criminology adjacent fields and stuff. Where might a student start out if they want to advance?
Well, I can jump on that really quickly. I posted some information in the chat on this one here, but it's important to note that you don't have to start in the public sector to then work in the public sector. And I've been mentioning the nonprofit sector. There's workinnonprofits.ca is a board that you can go to and kind of enter your criteria for searching for positions. It allows you to really kind of tailor it to your area and the topics of interest. But a lot of nonprofit organizations work closely with government or public service organizations. And it's a good way to get some of that frontline experience, which is great for building a CV, and you can kind of go part-time or full-time with that.
Great. No, thanks, that Mike. I did see Justine put her hand up. Justine?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's pretty common, I feel like, for people to go into kind of get their educational background and not really have an idea for sure what they want to do with it. And there definitely does exist so many different opportunities in so many different fields. And not one path is necessarily better than the other. I would really encourage you to for sure go to any sort of career fair that you can go to and chat with the people that are at those booths, because you're going to learn things about different opportunities that exist in different organizations. In policing, we often have information sessions. Any agency is going to have those. I would be signing up to go to any of those to actually learn. I was going to say I did post in here as well, but Civic Info is a really good resource for finding kind of government related jobs. I would definitely recommend going there as well. Yeah, there's a ton of opportunities out there, but sometimes it's that networking and talking to people that you realize that they exist.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one more panelist to go with this question. Jen, I see your hand up.
I was just going to note to go to the BC government websites as well. You'll see any jobs listed that are available to external applicants on the website. And it's a good way to get your foot in the door. And then once you apply and win a position, you have a chance to get any of those in-service postings that you don't see. So it's always a good apply for something that you have the skills, but maybe it's a little bit lower level of a position, and work your way up and then get those other postings is always a good option.
That's great advice, Jenna. Thanks for joining in with that. We'll move on to our next question. We did have a question in the chat about the OTEE exam, which is specific to CVSA. Given that we don't have any CVSA staff on the call right now, I am going to move past that question. But to that student, if you'd like to reach out to our office, we can certainly try to connect you with the appropriate person to talk to, or a source with CVSA who might be able to give you some advice if that's available. Question after that. One student is asking for New West Police Department. The student is interested in being a detective or working in homicide, but has steered away from that career path because they are an anxious individual and has viewed police work as, quote, a very high stress job. Justine, can you comment on what your experience has been working as a police officer? I'm supposing, just based on this question, in terms of stress levels, is that something that someone who's interested in policing should be aware of or take steps towards dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for sure there is stress in this job. I would love to tell you that there isn't. There definitely is. In saying that though, I also think this is where a person can take lots of good steps to prepare themselves for that. One is recognizing that work-life balance. There's a lot of people that get into policing that honestly make this their identity. Like this is who they are, and they cannot do anything outside of that. And I think there is something to be said for having a life outside of policing if you're going to get into this job, is having friends that are not police officers. It is having activities that you're doing outside of policing, whether that's, any type of fitness or like getting outdoors or having hobbies. It's having that separation, which I do truly think benefits the actual stress on the job, is knowing that when you leave this place, you can actually leave this place and go do things outside of this job. I wouldn't necessarily have that be a deterrent. Like I am for sure the person um, that I've always loved true crime. I've always like I'm the person that listens to true crime podcasts and watches like Forensic Files on Netflix. Like I for sure am that person. And getting in to be a detective at IHIT was such a wonderful and incredible experience. Yes, you are dealing with a lot of heavy things there, but it's also recognizing that you need to put steps in place to benefit yourself. It is having an open conversation about mental health and actually getting a counselor in place. It is having regular conversations with a counselor. It is putting in kind of all those stops beforehand and not trying to go back after the fact and seek those things out. Sometimes when you put those things in place to begin with, you are in a better place to deal with the stuff that actually comes with this career, which can honestly be such an incredible one.
No, that's great. Very good advice. Thank you very much. Our next question comes from a student. I think this is directed at the whole panel, as they haven't specified. How would one go about finding HR or HR related opportunities with your organizations? And are there any internship opportunities for that side of things? We're talking about a number of different organizations here. So I'm going to assume for the sake of time that most people can check out your various career websites and things like that, wherever you post job opportunities, and perhaps we can grab that information from you guys if it's not already been put in the chat. But maybe just to the panel, any of our panelists aware of any HR practicums within their organizations, or if the organizations even offer those kinds of positions? If not, that's totally fine. That's not to say to those listening that it doesn't exist necessarily. But if you're aware of those opportunities, maybe this would be a great opportunity to share.
I can pipe in with this. I think oftentimes people also forget within policing there's the civilian side of the house. We do have an internal HR here. We have people that work here that in accounting and finance and analysts and in court services and all of those things. So within police departments, there definitely are HR opportunities. My recommendation is just keeping an eye out on the career page for us is when those actually pop up. I can't say that there's practicum opportunities, but I can't say that there wouldn't be. So again, it's dealing with kind of the career center on this KPU end.
Absolutely. I see Jamie's hand up as well.
Yeah, you bet. I'll just say really quickly, I did post in the chat our careers page, and every year we have a student hiring program, and that can occur in a variety of our different departments and areas. I don't know off the top of my head if we have anything available in HR, but again, to check out the website with more information, with more opportunities as well.
Perfect. Awesome. And then Barry, we'll pop over to you before we move to the next question.
All right, no, just HR jobs. There's lots within the federal government, right? Like there's 300,000 to 400,000 federal government employees, and none of us would, turn our keys on our vessel or our vehicles without the HR staff that run our budgets and look after our staff for sure. There's lots. I just put the link in the job search for the federal government jobs. You do HR. I just did it. There's lots there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I see a couple other questions coming in. I know we're approaching the end of our event, so if we can ask panelists to keep them brief, just so we can take on as many other questions as we can. I do see a couple panelists also answering questions in the chat that are a bit lengthy, so thank you very much for that. It's very, very helpful. Question from Jasmine, one of our students attending. Are there any positions in policing that does not require a full driver's license? Quick answer from you, Justine?
Yeah, I can totally answer that. Policing jobs, like being a sworn police officer, yes, you do need a valid Class 5 driver's license. That's a minimum requirement. However, on the civilian side of things, it kind of depends role to role. There are many here where you don't actually need a driver's license because you're not going to be driving a work vehicle around. That would be kind of those internal positions. This is where for sure it's the going to career pages and actually setting up like job alerts for yourself to actually have those come through, and you'll see job to job whether or not a driver's license would be required. Like being a 911 operator is not going to necessarily require having a driver's license, nor would if you're working with CPIC or in court services. So those aren't going to require driver's licenses. So it does depend.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that answer. I think based on what has been answered in the chat, and I'm not seeing anything else come in, we have reached the end of the questions in the chat. Gita, I'll just pan back over to you. We are very close to the end of the event. If we have time for more questions, I'd say you could run through whatever you have left for our panelists. But other than that, I'll let you take over and get back to the event.
Okay, great. I know that the last two questions were directed actually at the BCPS team around process for applying for positions. I don't know if there's been some of that information already in the chat or addressed. So if there was any last minute things you wanted to talk or share, Jenna or Tina, around the process, or just even how to stand out that you haven't said already, feel free to add anything, and then we can go to Mike.
Okay. Yeah, just like I said before, our jobs are all done through our government website. So then you need to create you create a page, you upload your resume, and then you can start applying for jobs. The best way to stand out in the selection process is just having a thorough, detailed resume that shows your past work experience and your history. If it In the job posting, it will say if it requires a cover letter. Make sure that if it does require a cover letter, you put one in, and that your cover letter shows that you have the experience, the skills that meet the job requirement. So maybe print out the job requirement, go through it, and detail your resume and cover letter to fit into the job into the job requirements. We like it when you have done a little bit of research on the job you're applying for. So like if you are just applying for mass jobs and haven't, made your resume look or added things that we require, it might get screened out automatically. So make sure that you've done your research, Google the BC Prosecution Service, and understand what we do. And then if you're interested in completing a work placement with us, we do have a co-op employment program that you can apply to. So this is a great, So this is a great opportunity where you can work on real life scenarios that align with your education.
Great, that's great. We do have a co-op program in our criminology faculty, so that's great. So the last question really was for Mike, just around your experience, if you can talk about the key differences that you've observed in the public and nonprofit sectors, and how do these differences impact the nature of the work and professional outcomes? I know you've touched on a bit of it. And then additionally, mostly for crim students aiming to pursue careers outside of academia, what practical skills should they focus on to best prepare themselves to be successful in the field?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna jump on the second question there first, because I think it's probably the more useful one. There's a reason that your instructors keep asking you to do presentations and group work, even though sometimes these can be the more challenging aspects of being a student. And I really encourage people to really develop those skills and take them very seriously. I know when in the nonprofit sector, when I'm involved in hiring, a demonstrated background of really good applied collaborative work skills is hugely important. Very rarely in my field or in kind of fields adjacent do people work on their own in kind of a siloed environment. And so quite often you're dealing with kind of giving critical feedback on people's work, collaborating in those environments. So partnership and being able to work as a team, hugely important. And then I'm going to note that writing skills are also really important as well. Again, there's a reason why people ask you to write papers, because a lot of work in any of these fields requires a degree of report writing and certainly professional communication, and being able to do that kind of concisely and effectively and authentically and persuasively as well is really important. So developing those skills, which you already have as students, so being able to kind of leverage those and communicate how those are useful when you're seeking positions is really, really important. Have good writing samples of work you've done that you're proud of, that you've really put some time into, that demonstrate that. Those are good to have. To distinguish yourself in the context of an application, and really try and lean into an opportunity for collaborative work, so that you can say, I did this as a team, and that puts you ahead of the pack.
Yeah, super important for your whole career, no matter where you go. Barry, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just quickly, like a lot of students are, they're students and they don't want full-time jobs right away because they want to complete their degrees or other education. So the federal government has a federal student work experience program specifically for between years of school. And then it makes it really easy for someone to get hired on full time after that. They don't have to run as many processes because they've already got security clearance, or they, got the experience, and then they're recognized within that particular department. So a lot of departments draw from this, and including us.
That's fantastic. I'm looking at the time and we're exactly at 1:30. And I think we could carry on for quite some time with the discussion around here, but I wanted to just check in with Leila to see, are there any other questions in the chat, Leila?
Yeah, I'm just double checking, make sure we haven't missed anything. And I don't think we have any other questions that have come in that are new, so I think we're good to go.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to say on behalf of the CDC, on behalf of KPU, on behalf of all the students, I want to thank all our panelists and extend our deepest gratitude to each of you for attending, sharing your valuable career insights with our students, with all of us. I really couldn't have asked for a better group of panelists. You've led such engaging and informative conversations. Thanks for your support in inspiring our new generation of professionals. For all the students on here, Sergeant Justine Tom, and then from New West Police Department will be at our career fair, and I believe the First West Credit Union team will also be here. I don't know if Jamie will be here, but there will be a team from First West here. And I'm sure that you will see people from the BC Prosecution Service and from DFO at future events. So big round of applause to all our panelists. Thank you so much for your generosity and time. And that kind of ends the session. Yay!
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. I think we can end the recording, Leila. If anybody wants to stay behind for some